Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Have you ever seen a photograph of a Civil War soldier in this pose? Chances are you probably have not. When we talk about Civil War photography, we focus on the technology of the times and the fact that the medium in the 1860s wasn't created for spontaneity. This was the kind of technology that was, you had to pose, you had to take your time, the photographer had to focus the camera. There's a lot to consider. And still, there was always that wise guy that wanted to do, hold on a second, wanted to do this. And so here we are. This gentleman is not identified, but the spirit of thumbing the nose is as clear as it could possibly be. If you look at the Oxford Dictionary, you'll find the origin of the phrase thumb the nose dates to 1854. But as you know, by the time a phrase makes its way into a dictionary or some encyclopedia of knowledge, it has been in the public domain for some period of time in order for it to gain enough popularity to be able to get into those books. So I took a peek into newspapers.com just to see what I could see. And I found some examples that date to British newspapers in 1840 and the US press in 1841. So here's a reference. It's an 1840 London publication called The Champion and Weekly Herald. It's an editorial that rails on a political party. In the editorial, it exclaims, quotes, "Would thee had but betwixt finger and thumb the nose of every soft-headed fool." So there's an early reference to thumbing the nose, the earliest one that I could find. Again, that dates to 1840. I'm going to take a guess here that there's probably earlier mentions in books and other publications and possibly even in pre-recorded history. But let me continue. A year later in 1841, there's a English newspaper in West Yorkshire, and it gives you a bit of instruction about how to do it. Quote, "Lay thumb to nose and walk about with digits extended." The same year, 1841, a Pennsylvania publication, now we're across the pond, and in the United States, a publication called the Jeffersonian carried this news brief in its May 12th edition. The brief is titled "Cool." And here's the rest of the report. "It is said that the rogue who relieved the Commercial Bank of Cincinnati and the Bank of Kentucky of $13,000 each was an hour in counting his money in the latter bank and paid the cashier the postage on a New Orleans letter. He doubtless made certain flourishes with thumb and nose when fairly off with his plunder." So that's the first American reference. Now, let's jump ahead, way ahead to 1863, to the Civil War period. The publication, the Semi-Weekly Wisconsin, which is out of Milwaukee, offers another explanation about how to actually do the technique. Quote, "Put thumb to nose and gyrate the extended fingers for a moment." I dare say that this unidentified officer in this photograph is following the instruction perfectly. Put thumb to nose. I'll do it in his way. Put thumb to nose and gyrate the extended fingers. So there you have it. I've got one more reference for you. The August 10th, 1861 issue of the Fort Scott Bulletin in Kansas carries this Civil War story involving Confederate General Pierre G.T. Beauregard after the First Battle of Manassas, which occurred in July 1861, just a couple of weeks before this news report appeared. As the story goes, a member of the 11th New York Infantry, the rowdy Fire Zouaves, was hauled before the victorious general as a prisoner of war and, quote, manifested his contempt for that chieftain by putting his thumb to his nose and gyrating with his finger, end quote. The Zouave then kicked and knocked about a few soldiers, challenged Beauregard to a fight, and then took off running. Confederates fired shots at him, but they missed. The soldiers finally chased him down and captured their man. The story ends this way, quote, being marched off to jail and out in an ordinary cell, he signalized his first evening's lodgment there by setting it on fire. The rebels seemed to admire the cool audacity of the chap, and Beauregard himself laughed heartily at his pranks. So there you have it, a most unusual photograph of a Union officer thumbing his nose at who knows who, and the origins of the phrase. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.